Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode of the California Propertarian Podcast, abbreviated as CA Propcast. And on this show exists to uphold the individual natural right to private property. We believe that that is a right that's granted to us by our divine creator. We do not believe that this right can be justly revoked by any temporal entity, down here on earth, except through due process of law. The only just and lawful means under the natural law for one's private property rights to be revoked here in the temporal realm is through due process of law as prescribed in the U.S. Bill of Rights. So on every episode of this show, we attempt to examine another topic from the popular discourse that is ongoing right now that potentially has implications for the private property rights of Americans and in some cases for people in other parts of the world. And to do that today, we brought on Mr. C.J. Wallace, who is a finance expert and also an activist with the internationally renowned and time-honored John Birch Society, which has withstood the test of time, the nation's premier anti-communist organization, perhaps. And with that, I will kick the introduction over to Mr. Wallace, and then after that, as always, we'll dive into the meat of the issue. So, CJ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, man, thank you for having me on. I mean, I am honored. Like I said before, man, we appreciate what you're doing, informing people correctly about the Constitution, about the property rights that our divine creator, God, has given to us, right?
Thank
so
you.
if God gave it to us, government cannot take it away.
That's right.
And we appreciate you as well. Yeah, folks, thank you so much for having me on here.
Of course.
We just are amazed at what you're doing, the gospel that you're spreading. You know what I mean?
Thank
the
you.
Good news.
Thank you so much. You too.
I can't wait to get into it, man. We appreciate you so much.
And absolutely. So I guess to kick this off, as you know, we're living in very exciting times. Donald Trump is president-elect yet again. He has pulled off, earning 2 non-consecutive terms for the first time in U.S. history for any president, aside from Grover Cleveland. So, this is another historic first associated with Mr. Trump, and he's a man of many historic firsts. But to get down to brass tacks, so since he will be assuming office, assuming nothing absolutely insane happens, on January 20th, CJ, you're a finance guy. What would you recommend that the Trump administration do by executive order or through regulatory means to rein in inflation, reduce the suffering of ordinary, hardworking Americans, and also to rein in the Federal Reserve? What would you kind of recommend on a policy level that they do that they wouldn't necessarily need congressional approval for?
Woo! My goodness, Philip, that was a great question. And I'm actually going to start out with a little bit of a story. There was a story about a janitor who was seen mopping the same spot for 8 hours straight, 5 days in a row, the same spot for 8 hours. And until someone came along and said, "Sir, why are you mopping the same spot in a row with the faucet turned on?"
Oh, my God.
You see, this person who contacted the janitor and spoke these words to him knew that the problem lied in the source. You see, that water was continuing to run into the sink, and the sink kept on flooding.
Oh my
So
God.
when this person turned off the faucet, the janitor was able to mop up the spot dry. And what needs to happen in the Trump administration is they need to do the same thing. Now, the question then becomes, well, what's the faucet? How do we turn it off? How do we get to the root of the issue? And the root of the issue is what Ron Paul said. We need to end the Fed.
Yes, absolutely.
Many times, the fireman is the arsonist when you're dealing with tyrannical entities.
Yes.
People are not used to the type of evil, Philip, that we're seeing nowadays. But we need to, how do you stop evil, though? You've got to stop it at its source. What can the Trump administration do, right? They can take steps to ensure that the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal and there's no reserves.
That's right. Yeah.
is ended.
Yes.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, they can get rid of some of these useless departments, namely the Department of Education,
Yes.
perhaps the Department of OSHA, and all these other departments. Because if you were to look at society before these departments and then afterwards, as in the case of the Department of Education, you would see a stark difference between the education in America before the Department of Education and the education in America after the Department of Education. Why is that? Well, because of three men named John Dewey, Horace Mann, and Robert Owens. These three men were not only humanists, they took their ideas and poisoned the school system.
Yep.
And so in the Trump administration, and they are going to be taking moves. I have confidence that they're going to be taking moves to do this, but it's not up to the Trump administration to pass another law. I like what that one legislator said, Justine Wadsack. We don't need another law. We need to have a session that repeals laws.
Yes,
because as
absolutely.
you subtract, and this is the same case as in life, when you subtract, many times you add. And that is definitely the case when it comes to government. Government needs to be as limited as possible. It's really too big, Philip. And so the answer is obvious, just like in many cases, but we just need to see it. And there was a wonderful question by one of our teammates, and he said, yes, CJ, you keep saying in the Fed, but where's the practicality in it? What are we going to do after the Fed? And this is a very good question, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
But my question to him is, would you say the same thing about John Gotti?
Right.
Would you say the same thing about Al Capone?
Yes.
Right?
That's true.
When you want a solution, you can find a solution. You don't have to be under a criminal enterprise. You don't have to go by what some tyrant says, even if they sign it into law.
Yes.
Because did you know, just because someone signs something into law doesn't mean it's lawful?
Well, I mean, the vast majority of the laws and regulations we currently live under are not lawful, and that includes probably at minimum 80% of the federal government, if not 85 or 90. So right. is totally unlawful, both under the U.S. Constitution and under the laws of nature and nature's God. So, you know, and it's mind-boggling to think of how we got to this point from a federal government that in 1792, was so tiny you could fit it into a thimble.
Yes,
so
exactly. So who came along and did this? Well, there are enemies that came along and did this, just like it says in Matthew 13 and 25.
Absolutely.
Talking about the wheat and the tares. While men slept. So while the church slept, while men and women slept, and they let these crooks into the government, influencing their children into these places of power.
The universities.
They took the throne. Exactly.
Yep.
They took the throne and started influencing from there. But now the people, as you saw in November 5th, are tired of that. They need direction. And Philip, believe it or not, you're part of that humongous movement that is coming, that is swelling, okay, of people that say, no, we are not going to take it anymore. Don't give us this cock and bull story about, oh, we need to do this to the prices and need to do that to the prices. No, you don't. We don't need to perpetuate a problem or have it continue on ad infinitum. We need to end it. We need to end that problem. And that problem is, part of the problem is the Federal Reserve.
Well, absolutely. What we have to do, it seems to me, is we have to do something to suspend and or phase out, because we might not be able to do it overnight, but we got to do something to suspend or phase out their ability to, print Federal Reserve notes anytime they damn well please. And,
right.
there has to be something done to restrict their ability to do that. The thing is I'm not enough of an expert on economics to know what exactly could constitutionally be done by executive order that would make it more difficult for them to do that. And, I was wondering if you were aware of maybe, and again, we do need to repeal laws and executive orders rather than impose them. But is there an executive order that Trump could sign that would make it a little more difficult for Jerome Powell and his cronies, to keep, foisting this theft by inflation upon us?
Right. Well, the thing with executive orders, and oh man, this is a great one, is now you're setting a precedent for the next administration, right? And so what we're doing with executive orders is we're saying, well, you can't do that and you can't do this. We need to do something a little more structural to where, so that a recession has to do with the cycles, right?
Yes.
Of finances, okay? Versus a depression, that's a structural issue in the finances, all right? What we need to deal with is the structural issue. So the reason why we don't want to do the cycle thing, which would be this executive order, is we need to make sure that the foundation of the Federal Reserve is taken out.
Yes.
Okay? The foundation is ripped out from up under them. So what is this going to entail? It's going to entail having a conversation with them, okay, and letting them know what has to take place. Okay? Federal income tax. Is it constitutional?
Absolutely not. If the Constitution, all right, and that's where we want to base this.
Right. If the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and it is, Judge, all right, Your Honor, it is. It's over precedent.
Yes.
Okay, Constitution is.
Absolutely.
If the Constitution is the highest law in the land, and you are not going by it, isn't that illegal? Now, if it's illegal, right, then who would be the criminal? We need to start rephrasing the conversation and letting them know this is what you're faced with. You've already been audited, and you remember the audit of the Fed.
Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
And how many billions, okay, were wasted. We do want to rephrase the question. Now, this may seem to people kind of, oh man, that's kind of extreme. But I ask you, is it any more extreme than what is taking place right now? At what point in time do you say that's enough?
Well,
there was something unprecedented that happened lately, and I believe it happened either today or yesterday, and it was the transition. You know how much taxpayer money went to Trump's transitional team?
No, I don't. I'm curious how much that would cost. Yeah.
Usually it's GSA's involved. Of course, taxpayer money is involved with the transition of a president, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yep.
Zero.
Oh, wow.
You can look this up. Zero of the taxpayer money. It was all privately funded.
Huh.
This is the type of structure that we need.
Yes.
Do we see now why the deep state is after us, right? Do we see now why the deep state is after Trump?
Absolutely.
This is why.
And I would imagine the taxpayer money that would have otherwise funded, Trump's transition to his incoming, administration, it was probably siphoned away to be sent to the Ukraine, to continue to fund a criminal war by a criminal regime that was unlawfully installed and foisted upon the Ukrainian people by the CIA and by the U.S. State Department. That's probably where that money went, I would assume. Because Joe Biden, as sort of one of his last acts in office, he just ordered another round of aid and weapon shipments to the Ukraine that undoubtedly is going to foist more suffering upon both the Ukrainian and the Russian people. And it's really incredible to me how there is endless billions in aid to be shoveled at the Ukraine, to be shoveled at the Middle East, to fund terrorism and tyranny all over the world. But there's not enough money to assist the tax-paying, hardworking Americans who are devastated by floods and hurricanes in North Carolina. That never ceases to amaze me. It's a slap in the face. That's exactly
really
what it is.
At the same time, it's communicating to us. It's communicating to us without actually saying anything verbatim, right? And we are pushed to the brink,
Yep.
just like they were back in the 1700s,
Yep.
okay? We're pushed to the brink, and it's another, what are you going to do?
Right.
You see, the reason why all of this is happening, right, is they're waiting for a response. If they don't get any, then they're going to continue on with
Yep.
what they're doing as they've done.
Yep.
It's not until the people say no more executive orders.
Yep.
I mean, as a whole, right? We're not going to take it, that people then begin to change,
Yep.
right? The legislators begin to change. We've witnessed that right here in Arizona. Okay. We're pushing back. And because they step back, we have to push back even more. We've got to push back until they put it back.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's as far as the Federal Reserve goes, it seems to me that, maybe there is a way that, when Trump installs more, better United States attorneys, I call it the U.S. Department of Injustice, but, hopefully the needle can be moved, more toward the scales of justice. But when Trump installs better United States attorneys over there, maybe certain members of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, can be leveraged and they can be threatened with prosecution. If they continue these, these criminal, what are similar to money laundering schemes, do you think that would be a viable path to deal with these people, perhaps?
Absolutely. Actually, I'm a part of the Federalist Society,
Oh,
right?
good.
FedSoc,
Excellent organization.
FEDSOC.org,
Yep,
man. It is an excellent organization
it
that we're
is.
just talking about the SEC. And I look around at the judges, the attorneys that are a part of that group, and
Mhm.
I find relief, man. I
Yes,
really do.
we need them.
Because they're able to intelligently and constitutionally come at these things and have the conversation, let them know what the law says, the
Yep.
letter of the law says, and then apply it. Yes, that's a great idea, Philip.
Mhm.
I would love for the Trump administration to go ahead, talk with some of these lawyers that know what they're talking about in terms of, I mean, get them all together, right?
Yeah.
From the Federal Reserve Board on down to the SEC to on down to everyone and let them know, okay, we need to transition out of this. Okay,
Yes.
how are we going to do it? Let's look at the law. Let's see what we can do. And the reason why I keep on saying conversations are important,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You just don't want to slap somebody with, something,
Right.
okay? You want to let them know, hey, we want you to cooperate, right?
Yes.
First and foremost. And then let's see if we can have some level ground here and then go from there.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It seems to me as well that maybe, and of course this is going to require some political pressure and political leverage, but we might be able to get some congressional repeal action underway if we can, because we do have slight Republican majorities in both houses. I think we have 53 GOP majority in the Senate, and then a razor thin GOP majority in the House of Representatives. Some of those obviously are neocons or rhinos or whatever you want to call them. But maybe with the right political pressure, if we threaten their careers, and their election prospects, come next round of elections, maybe we can get them to repeal some of the carte blanche laws that allow the Federal Reserve to operate the way it does, as a legalized banking cartel. Do you think that there's hope for maybe something along those lines too?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do,
Excellent.
especially with the new Trump administration. You see, the United Nations, we have to get out of it. Okay?
Yes,
We have to
absolutely.
get out of the United Nations. But let's go ahead and connect the dots. What are the bankers? Okay. These banks, many of them like the United Nations. They have
Mhm.
ties with the United Nations. They're doing things with the United Nations. BlackRock,
Yep.
ESG. Have you ever heard of the ESG policies?
Oh
Which
yeah.
shout out to our amazing Arizona Corporation Commission here, right? Kevin Thompson absolutely said, let's legally protest this. I was like, man, I got to write this guy a letter. Okay.
Fantastic.
And congratulate him. I just got to let you know that we are fighting back here in Arizona, right? We are fighting back here in New Mexico, and you're fighting back as well. But on to
Thank
the
you so
topic,
much.
we've got to make sure that the United Nations is out of the U.S. and the U.S. is out of the United Nations. This would deal a heavy blow to many of the problems that we're facing,
It would.
be it ESG, trying to take land, farmland. I'm talking about a whole litany of issues that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our close ties with the United Nations. You know, the co-founders of the other founders of the United Nations were, right?
Well, I do know that the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, before he became Secretary General, he was the chairman of Socialist International. So it's been a communist and revolutionary socialist infested organization since its inception. Its goal and its agenda was to spread and disseminate communism and cultural Marxism throughout the world. And they directly and indirectly steal every year probably tens of billions at least, if not hundreds of billions of dollars from the American taxpayer. So, but as far as their founders, I'm guessing their founders were probably mainly communists. I'm guessing they were.
Stalin and Alger Hiss.
Yes.
Joseph Stalin and Alger Hiss.
Who was a convicted spy, right?
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah, he got caught. Yeah. And so that should tell you right there what they're all about. But guess what? In order to fool people, you've got to change the language. You've got to say things like sustainable development.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't that sound good?
Sustainable development. Yeah.
Exactly.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
That's what they mean. Yes,
yeah, so.
Exactly. Yeah. They're going to take your property rights, and literally they don't mind killing you.
No.
They really don't. I'm talking about it's the same spirit. It's the same attitude. Okay. And so what we need to do is make sure that we send them a message. We're not playing anymore.
Absolutely.
The gun that's right outside. Exactly. The gun that's right outside of their headquarters. I believe it's in New York City.
It is. Yeah. It's a huge monument. Yeah.
The little statue outside with the gun.
The barrel's tied up. Yeah.
Yeah. The barrel's tied up. What they're saying, okay, and this is interpretation now, all right?
We will disarm you.
They want you defenseless.
Yes.
And that is not the American way. We
No.
follow the U.S. Constitution, not the UN resolution.
Not the UN Charter or whatever it's called.
Charter, whatever it is. Yes, exactly.
Honestly, and I think that a critical mass of the American people are furious enough that I almost wish they would try something so bold. I almost do because honestly, I think that their whole system of tyranny would come crashing down, like the house that was built upon the sand. If they dared to do such a thing. But unfortunately, so far they've been a little bit too smart, to jump the gun, so to speak. No pun intended. But I am aware that the UN has for generations now been pushing. It's like the Convention on Arms or something, or like the UN Arms Treaty or something like that. That is clearly a backdoor scheme to disarm not just American civilians but civilians all around the world. And we all know why they'd want that. Michael Bloomberg is involved in it, and Moms Demand Action, the Brady campaign. We always know what comes right after gun control. History is very instructive in this regard.
Yeah, one of the arms of the United Nations, the CFR, which is also for the breakdown of any sovereignty in a nation.
Yep.
Michael Bloomberg is a part of the CFR, and so are some journalists as well. And so,
journalists.
If you look up exactly, if you look up the Brzezinski, is it Mika Brzezinski?
Oh, of MSNBC.
If you look up her father, it's a very interesting read.
Yes.
Very intelligent man, okay, but communist nevertheless.
Yes.
And so we do want to make sure that this information is just broadcasted to people so that they can do their own research and then recognize that they are trying to do you like they did that warthog. You remember that story?
How
they put up that wall? They put out some cornbread for the warthog in the middle of the wilderness.
Yes.
That warthog went out, got it. All right. They put up another wall. Okay. And then another one.
Yes.
until the warthog was trapped. And they're trying to do the same thing to the American people, but we are not buying it. And it's because of people like you, man.
Oh, thank you, and you as well. And because this is the new information warfare, and we're both doing our part here. That the mainstream media is dying, and thank God for it. Especially ever since Trump won, CNN and MSNBC's ratings and viewership have gone through the floor. So as a matter of fact, with MSNBC, there's a lot of talk that they can't even sustain themselves as a business model anymore. And Elon has been toying with the idea of buying them up, which would be a really fascinating thing to see. But it seems to me that what we used to call the mainstream media is not going to be the mainstream media for much longer. The mainstream media is going to be, independent podcasts, independent shows on YouTube and Rumble. And, it's going to be, things like Gab and BitChute and Odyssey, Brighteon, other platforms like that. So their system is dying, our system is rising, and that should give us plenty of cause for hope because journalism is dead. It has been for a long time. So if propaganda is going to be the way of the game, we want to make sure that it's our ideology that's being taught.
Exactly, because ideology is how governments operate. Yeah, exactly. So it does need to be taught.
It is. And, this is also going to be critical for us to win the information war against the cultural Marxists that are trying to foist transgender ideology on kids. This is a topic we deal with extensively. And I also think that's a tremendous part of the reason why Kamala Harris and Tim Walz lost is because parents around the country, including many Democrats and some who aren't even particularly right-wing, they look at them and they say, hey, these people are saying that drag queens should be able to strip naked in front of our kids and twerk in their face, and they're saying that if a school counselor tells my kid that they were born in the wrong body, that kid is going to be mutilated, they're going to be given artificial hormones, and if I protest in any way, my custody is going to be revoked, they're going to kidnap my child. And so I think parents around the country, they looked at that and they said, we're not voting for that. They said
exactly.
we're going to protect our kids. And
it was all because of that's a part of the what you just said, cultural Marxism.
Yes,
okay,
it is to destroy the family.
That's exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And so I'm glad, man, that people are waking up. They went to the school boards, and was it the FBI?
FBI
and
DHS,
after these moms?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did.
Oh, my goodness.
They Merrick Garland classified these protesting parents as enemies of the state, basically. So it goes to show you that the FBI and the security state, they've really become little more than a Praetorian Guard for a perverse and degenerate ruling class. It's tragic to see that people that are protesting against the literal satanic mutilation of kids are being classed as enemies of the state.
Right.
I think that the New World Order went too far, and the tide truly is turning. I can see it in the streets, I can see it in the news, I can see it at the micro and macro level. I really think that the New World Order just went too far with this stuff. I do.
Yeah, exactly, man. What Robert Welch said it best. He said there's going to come a time where these guys are dancing naked in the streets.
Yep.
And Philip, we are in this time. We are seeing their agenda. We're seeing what they're doing. And guess what? It's not too late.
Yeah,
right?
That's
we
right.
may have been asleep for a long time, but now we've awoken, right? And we are going towards them, playing offense, not just defense. Now people are suing left and right some of these entities. And you said something that really triggered something in my mind, and that was, wow, enemies of the state, these moms, dads that are against these tyrannical agendas, they're enemies of the state. Well, what would that mean? That the state is the enemy of the people.
It is. Well, and I think
some of the elements, exactly, some of these elements in the state are enemies of the people. And so when that happens, we've got to continue. We've got to continue to resist, because there is a resistance, right?
Yes.
That is lawful resistance. And that is when they want you to do something that is against the law.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. And, it's amazing. I think we can achieve quite a bit with honestly just mass noncompliance. I think that it really demonstrates how weak these tyrants really are when a critical mass of the people just refuses to comply, and there's so many of them that they can't effectively enforce their edicts against them. And I think we've seen that with this parents' movement. I think we saw it to a lesser extent, back in the days of the COVID lockdowns.
Right.
It's incredible that, yes, Trump has these flaws and he has these problems, and in many ways he's not even the ideal candidate. But the New World Order went so far, and their degenerate excesses went to such a degree that people, including from constituencies that aren't traditionally Republican, they gladly lined up to vote for him. So
Right. I mean, who would have thought, man, that RFK Jr. would join the Trump team?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's history making in and of itself, given his pedigree.
Right. A Kennedy. And so it's just something to behold, man. It really is. And people say all the time, this is a democracy. He's a danger to democracy. Well, thank God. Thank God he's a danger to democracy.
Well,
Do you know what democracy is?
Well, first of all, not only is democracy a horrific and appalling and tyrannical system, not only that, but if anything, the Democratic Party, by their own perspective, by their own definition, is much more of a danger to democracy than anybody in the Trump administration. When you consider that Trump won the popular vote, they admit that he won the popular vote, and yet they claim that his election is a threat to democracy. But by their definition, it should be considered a fulfillment of democracy. It's amazing. It's democracy. When it suits their agenda. When it pushes their agenda forward. But the second people democratically vote for something that they don't like or inconveniences them, then it's a threat to democracy. It was the same thing with Brexit. The British people democratically voted to leave the European Union, and yet we were told that Brexit was a threat to democracy.
Yep.
These people are unbelievably two-faced and dishonest.
Wow, man. The hypocrisy. You know what I mean? It's just amazing to me. Wow. Well, you're right, man. That did happen, didn't it?
Their hypocrisy knows no bounds.
Right.
You have Hillary Clinton, who, as we were talking about before, she supports the gender transitioning of children. But when her daughter Chelsea was, I think a preteen or maybe in her younger teenage years, she wouldn't let her pierce her ears. But she thinks that the genital mutilation of kids after they're told they're in the wrong body is perfectly acceptable. So, that's the other group of people we need to prosecute. The Trump administration needs to do everything lawful and possible to ensure that anyone who participates in the gender transitioning of minors is severely punished. These people need to be charged with child abuse, aggravated battery, child molestation. Those people should be treated exactly like child molesters are treated.
Yes, and you know what? Why would we do that, right? And there's a reason why. Oh, it's a very intelligent reason. It's to set precedent, to let the others know, don't even think about doing this.
Right.
Because this is wrong. But the law says it's right. Listen, but the law of God and nature, says it's wrong.
It does.
Does not even nature teach you? Paul, an apostle, actually alluded to nature as teaching people, okay? Yep. And so we need to make sure that these things are set in place so that it doesn't become an unnatural society or an artificial society, which is what they're trying to lean us towards.
Yeah, they're trying to destroy the family unit, which we know leads to less prosperity. It leads to more poverty, more crime. It leads to more welfare dependency, and they love welfare dependency because it guarantees them more votes and more power. And then that in turn leads to more printing of money and more inflation. Which further impoverishes people. It was a really profound revelation to me when I realized that they want us to be poor and miserable and pathetic. I used to think before that they just didn't care about us, but then I realized they actually want us to be poor, miserable peasant serfs. That's actually what they want, and they want us to be atomized. They don't want us to have a family that we can rely on and who can rely on us. They don't want us to understand our heritage, where we come from. They want to sever our relationship with our loving parents. And you just come to realize that the puppet master behind all this has to be Satan himself.
Yes, absolutely,
with what's
absolutely,
being
man.
done.
And getting back to the economics of it, there was a fella who said Murray Rothbard,
Oh yeah,
and I'm
great
actually
hero of mine.
yes, yes, absolutely. Just a genius, man. You
He
know
was.
him, von Mises. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness,
yeah,
beautiful.
those guys.
Um,
Yep.
I, I, I am more, I lean more towards that type of thinking. And he actually wrote a book entitled "What Government Has Done to Our Money." And so if we get away from the Maynard Keynes, right? The John Maynard
Oh
Keynes way
yeah,
of thinking,
that guy.
which
Yep.
guess what? He was a communist, right? He was a
Mhm.
socialist. No wonder why, right? And and go into more of the Ludwig von Mises
Mhm.
and the Murray Rothbard, more of this Austrian economics,
Yep.
we'll see a shift that would have never occurred before because of common sense banking. It's called common sense banking, but we need the influence. You see, it's a battle of influence here. That's why some of these ideologies are winning out. People who know better aren't speaking up. And so that's why podcasts like yours are just so important. We need people to know who Murray Rothbard is. We need
Yes,
people to know who Ludwig von Mises is. Why are these men, right, in the shadows, right? Why do we have to search out for them?
that's
There's
right.
coming a time where this is going to take the place of John Maynard Keynes, right? And his philosophy on how you should run an economy,
Well, and
right?
you hear very little about great economic luminaries and philosophers like Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises in the economics departments of universities. They were barely taught back at Pepperdine where I attended because their views are considered so heterodox. Because most economists in this country, particularly in universities and think tanks, are by default Keynesians. They support fiat currency. More printing of fiat currency. They support deficit spending. In perpetuity. That's how they've been trained. They're trained like dogs. To support all that and not question it. But what was so fantastic about men like Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises is they inspired guys like Erwin Schiff, the tax protester, who's another great hero of mine. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Yes.
And he was of course martyred for his courageous stand against the unconstitutional federal income tax. He was murdered in federal prison by
Mm.
the United States government, by the U.S. Bureau of Prisons. But one of the many facts that's critical that he pointed out during the talks that he would give about the income tax is that he was pointing out in the 90s how the U.S. dollar had lost like 95% of its relative purchasing power over the previous century. And so, and like you were explaining, von Mises and Rothbard explained how that happens. They explained that fiat currency does that. That's the inevitable result when you untether the currency to something concrete.
Mm.
And you
Exactly.
open it to so much manipulation, and the people that are enriched are this banking cartel, and the people that suffer are it destroys the middle class. First of all, it wipes them out, and the working class are reduced to even further poverty than what they were already in, and the tragedy just compounds itself and continues.
I mean, you brought up a good point. Constitutional money.
Yep.
Okay, constitutional money. Trump needs to get together with these states that have already implemented in their bills
Hmm.
that they are going to constitutional money,
Yep.
and he needs to say, guys, how can we do this? Because I like the thinking of, I don't know if you've heard him or your audience knows about a man named R. Buckminster Fuller.
No, that
R.
name doesn't ring a
Buckminster
bell.
Fuller. Yeah, yeah. He was the fellow who introduced me to the concept, and actually Robert Kiyosaki talks about him a lot.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
He's considered a futurist, right?
Hmm.
And he said, what we need to do is we need to, if we see something that we don't like in society, let's build something to phase that out. And what he did was he pointed towards a particular businessman, Henry Ford, how that he didn't need to preach against the horse and buggy. He just introduced the vehicle, right?
Yes.
Model A, Model T. And guess what? All of a sudden, very quickly, many of these street sweepers who would sweep up the manure, the horse manure,
Yeah.
they were out of jobs because more and more people started buying the Model A and the Model T. That's what we need to do. So the Trump administration needs to introduce, right, some of these things. And you were talking about the executive order. Let's put that in line And you've got to have something within there that says constitutional money, right?
Yes.
We got to get back to that. We've got to tether it back to gold. Who took us off the gold standard, right? August 15th, 1971, off the gold standard.
Nixon.
But it was because of the convincing or the influence of some of these tyrannical, and I don't even call them globalists anymore, some of these tyrannical people who wanted to weaken America. No more. We've got to go back to that gold standard, or a standard, right, which is the best, to where we can tether that to.
Certainly.
So constitutional money is very important.
And the Founding Fathers, in their wisdom, they saw this because, they built that definition into the Constitution itself. Right. And the untethering of the U.S. dollar from the gold standard, which, is one of the greatest tragedies in our history, it occurred in a lot of gradual stages, as these things often do. It's the frog in the pot of boiling water. And, because I think wasn't it in 1933 that FDR, he took the first major step to sever the U.S. dollar from the gold standard, and then Nixon completed that, as you mentioned, in 1971. And so, this occurred over many generations. So, because they couldn't just rip the rug out, from under us at once. They had to do it in stages so that people would buy into it. And then, of course,
Absolutely.
But before about little less than a generation before 1933, the Federal Reserve is established.
December 23rd, 1913. And it was just a travesty, right? 2 days before Christmas. Can you believe that?
I know.
And it had to be so secretive.
On Jekyll Island,
Yeah. So, we can't mention names and all of this stuff. And so you see the gradual deterioration influenced by these men. And what you want to do is you want to take it back, and you want to see the conversation. What were the conversations that were had? And even though this man was a part of a different department, it was the Department of Education that he was a part of, John Dewey, we can know a little bit more about how the communist thinks, right?
Yes.
He said, we cannot foist this idea upon the American public all at once.
No.
We've got to do it in increments. That's what he said, Philip. Can you believe that?
He spelled it out.
So, exactly. And so that's why it's slowly but surely, because if you do it all at once, it's too obvious and you'll be done for.
Yep.
But if it's little by little, if someone speaks out against it, then you have infighting within the peasants.
That's right. And especially when it's being done in tandem, as you mentioned, with an education system that's designed by guys like Horace Mann, who, openly borrowed from the Prussian model of education, which is designed not to teach people how to think. It's designed to create a populace that is utterly subservient to the state. That's what it's designed to do, and that's what Horace Mann set out to create. So, when you use such an education system and a bureaucracy like the Department of Education to ensure that people don't understand what sound money is, and they don't understand what money is supposed to be, and they don't understand, how to insulate money and an economy from the ravages of inflation and fiat currency, then what you have is people that are getting poorer and poorer, and they can't understand why.
Exactly. I mean, name a fiat currency that has actually succeeded.
That has actually made
the
people
history
richer.
of time.
That's right. No fiat currency has ever made anybody richer or more prosperous except for a very small banking cartel elite. So that's
there you go.
All it really does. For the rest of us, for the middle class, it doesn't just weaken them; it eventually obliterates them. Like one very intelligent friend of mine who I was talking to the other day, I was telling him, the middle class is being badly eroded. It's under assault. It's under siege. And he said it's not being eroded or under siege. He said that the middle class, as we understood it, is gone. He was telling me, as far as he can tell, there's only three classes in American society. He said there's the very wealthy, very powerful elites. And then below them, there's the white-collar professional managerial class, and then below them, there's the working class. He said the middle class, as we would have conceived of it in the 50s, is gone. There's just, professional managers with university degrees, and then there's struggling blue-collar workers underneath them. And even a lot of members of the white-collar professional managerial class are struggling. I have friends who have white-collar corporate jobs who barely scrape by. They're barely scraping by with jobs that would have easily permitted them to buy a home and support, a growing family just a couple of generations ago. And that's a terrible tragedy.
Right. And you got to remember too, man, it was all designed that way.
Yep.
Okay. And that's the importance of letting people know you've got to be, forget these people who are saying, oh, I don't talk about politics. Those days are gone.
Yeah.
You've got to be involved with your civil government in some way, shape, or form, or they're going to make sure that you wish you were. All right.
Yep. Yes.
And it's going to be too late. When they knock on your door, it's too late. When they're in your face, it's too late.
Yep.
Right now is not too late. While we have the time, let's take advantage of this time, man.
Yes.
And you were saying something very, very good. What I want to emphasize as well is that the laws and the things that we're promised, right, as Americans by the government officials, we need to make it clear we want you to undo some of these works that have undone us.
Yes.
Period.
Yep.
I'm talking about, like you were just saying, man, the middle class is gone, right? We need to make sure that we have a balance to where they're listening to the people and not to their lobbyists.
Yes.
And so how is that going to happen, though? How are we going to bring that about? You've got to be involved. You got to listen to this station, right? You've got to make sure, you got to ask, hey, Philip, how do I get involved? How do I stop this? Because you can.
Yes.
The power of one, man, is very powerful, okay? Because you're not alone, right?
No.
You're on the right side of history.
Yes.
Philip, I just want to let you and the producer know you're on the right side of history.
Thank you. You too. You too.
Right?
And it just reminds me, too, a few weeks ago I interviewed Tom DeWeese, who was also at the John Birch Society Leadership Conference, and what he really emphasizes, and I'm so glad he does, is he emphasizes being involved in your local government at the municipal and county level, whether it's your city council, your county commission, your school board, your library board, your utilities board, what have you, because since it's localized, it's the easiest for you to influence, and it's really easy for you to just drive down with a bunch of others and show up and, peaceably assemble for a redress of grievances. And, if we hit those pressure points all around the country, if that's occurring all around the country, the bureaucrats over in D.C. and the Beltway, they will hear it. They will. Yes. If we pressure our local officials to erect barriers to first of all end the local tyranny, abolish that, and also erect as many barriers as possible to the larger scale state and federal tyranny, we will be heard. We need to make sure that our county commissions and our sheriffs say if federal bureaucrats like the ATF or the EPA, the FDA want to come down here and violate our rights, they're going to have a problem. They will face arrest, they will face prosecution, they will face resistance, and at a minimum they will face mass noncompliance.
Right, and I'm so proud of Huntington Beach.
Me too. Yes.
Oh my goodness, man.
Me too.
Right there in California, man. They are I believe they declared themselves a constitutional republic.
They probably did. Yeah. They're a charter city. Yeah.
Yes, and so also in Indian River County, they introduced themselves as a constitutional republic as well.
Yep.
And so the policeman was speaking, letting us know. I was like, oh my goodness, look at all these counties. They're coming together. And that's actually what James Madison introduced to us. He said, you've got to have uneasiness, and many of these states, right, need to work together. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're seeing the federal overreach of the prior administration, right, and administrations before that. And we're saying, no, we're actually going to reach out to states that are like-minded and that love freedom, that love the Constitution, and we're going to join with them.
That's right.
This is allowed by James Madison because of the federal government overreach, because of the lack of real help of the federal government. And of course, we want to make sure that we emphasize we're not talking about 100% of them, because there are some that remnant there that believe right in the Constitution still.
Oh, yeah.
But those that are trying to reach their hand, the bureaucracy, we're saying, no way, we don't want it anymore. You've equated democracy with bureaucracy. We don't want it. This is a republic, and we're going to keep it.
That's exactly right. And Shasta County did something similar with regard to, some of the abuses and fraud of the 2020 election. Shasta County, makes sure that their ballots are hand counted, to avoid manipulation by this software and these algorithms from these voting machine systems. And so we're seeing points of resistance everywhere. And a little while back, I interviewed Steve Tuminello of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association.
Yeah.
Sheriffs especially are so critical to pushing back on this tyranny. They really are. And, I think we're reaching a point, very soon because, the gun rights movement is succeeding. We're successfully, gaining a lot of good rulings from the federal courts because of the judges Trump appointed, Federalist Society judges in many cases, that are striking down this, this federal and state gun control tyranny, especially in states, like California out here. I think we're getting to the point that some constitutional sheriffs will start to arrest ATF agents that come into their county to violate people's rights. And, I really that's a day I'm really looking forward to.
Oh man, we actually already witnessed a sheriff during Hurricane Helene. FEMA tried to come in. FEMA agents tried to come in. There was already a confrontation of the sheriff saying, "Excuse me, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so that tension is already there. Right next to us, New Mexico, there are already plenty of sheriffs that have said, "I know that you want to pass this gun law." Governor, right?
Yes.
But we are not going to enforce it.
Yes.
And just like you said, man, sheriffs are so critical because they're the ones that can exercise nullification.
Yep.
And all that is saying no.
And
right?
posse comitatus.
Exactly. Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan had a saying back in the 80s, and that was just say no.
Just say no. Yeah.
Drugs,
just say no to drugs.
So that's So we got to just say no to tyranny.
Yeah.
And that's what these sheriffs are doing, man. Very proud of Mark Daniels, very proud of Mark Fincham, very proud of these sheriffs that have come along and have said, no way. We're going to deputize whole congregations because there's no way that the federal government is going to take our rights away. God gave them to us, and we're going to keep them.
Yeah, the arrogance of these state and federal officials thinking that they're going to come in and they're going to impose mask mandates and lockdown orders. That the EPA that they walk onto the private property of farmers and ranchers in Idaho and South Dakota, and they tell them that puddle right there is a protected wetland, and now we're going to decide how you can use your property that's been in your family for 6, 7, 8 generations. It's like that. That's just the level of arrogance there and hubris is simply outrageous.
Oh, it sure is, man. Just thinking about the economy and what the Trump administration can do, I was thinking about this, and I haven't studied it too much, but our friend, Catherine Austin Fitts, right? And I call her a friend, man. I've never met her before, but man, she's such an inspiration.
Absolutely.
She was talking about state banks. Tennessee actually has in their bill the allowance for a state bank. North Dakota already has a state bank. And you look at the state bank, okay, and you look at how much power they would have within their community.
Yes.
Against federal government designed crisis. And you would see, whoa, wait a minute, maybe this is another barrier we can put up because it is state, right, sanctioned. So this state bank is something that I wouldn't say is in competition with the Federal Reserve, but it is something that can stem that tide because we're talking about constitutional money from this bank as well. And so, I haven't studied it out a bit, but I remember that. And I said, man, I think that's worth looking into, especially when you see the pattern of the Federal Reserve and what their part was in these different crises that have come along for the American people.
Well, yeah,
and the world.
Absolutely. It's like, like you said, it's not in direct conflict with what the Federal Reserve is doing, but it's like a parallel system, where the state government or the state banks that they might have like some gold and silver reserves that could be particularly helpful in insulating at least their economy against the ravages of inflation here. And back to pushing back against federal tyranny real quick, but before we hop off, I'm so glad that the Supreme Court struck down the Chevron rule and they made it a little bit more difficult for federal bureaucrats to run roughshod over mostly ordinary rural Americans. just out there in the sticks. And, it's a little more difficult for them now to, come onto some rancher's land and tell them that, that puddle is a protected wetland. So, thank God we are making progress, thanks in large part to your friends in the Federalist Society.
Yes, absolutely.
They do a lot of this work.
Oh, yes, man. And they're doing a lot of hard work, and I appreciate it, man.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is the thing. A lot of the judges are just waiting, right?
Yep.
They're waiting for people to step up and to be brave, right? So that we can get our country back, man.
Yes.
And the judges can only do so much. They can only say so much. It's up to us to bring this to their attention so that they can do the right thing by the law and implement that law. Make sure, not implement it, but and I'm thank God for the three branches of government, right?
Yes.
But to look at it, to rule on it, and to put it in the books, man, it's just an amazing thing that some of these judges and attorneys are doing. My hat's off to them.
To get that precedent nailed down, get that jurisprudence nailed down for future generations and make it very difficult to overturn. And I think on that front, we are making excellent progress. But anyway, CJ, thank you so much for coming on today. If there's any last remarks you'd like to add, please do. But it's such a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to having you again sometime in the near future, to brief us on some of the, fascinating developments that no doubt are going to be occurring in the next, several months, particularly after January 20th. But before we sign off here, is there anything you'd like to add for the audience, regarding inflation or the Federal Reserve or any other topic?
Absolutely, man. I just want to add that Benjamin Franklin said it best. He said, it's a republic if you can keep it, not if Trump can keep it.
That's right.
Not if J.D. Vance can keep it, not if C.J. can keep it, not if Philip can keep it. No, we can keep it, you know what I mean? But not even if you, right?
That's right. Not even if not even if the Federalist Society can keep it.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, it's down to us. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to take responsibility. Trump isn't in office yet, and who knows what they have planned for him.
Oh, I know.
Right? So we got to get to work, right?
Yes.
And start going to the city council, going to our county board, right? So that's what we're going to do, man. We're going to continue on to be activists.
We can't take a victory lap yet. Yeah, we can't rest on our laurels yet. Now's not the time for that. The hard work is really just beginning.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
And we need a good sustained, at least solid 4 years of, constant pushback from our side. That's what we need. St. Paul said, pray without ceasing. We need to resist without ceasing.
That's right, man. And James said it best. Submit yourself to God, resist the devil, and he has to flee.
Yep, he will flee from you. Yep, that's right. That's right. He said it very well there. Well, CJ, thank you so much for coming on to discuss these immersive and weighty topics. And like I said, we look forward to having you on again sometime in the near future. And obviously, we're moving into another holiday season, so Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
Always make sure to say Merry Christmas to each other. No Happy Holidays here. It's got to be Happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas.
That's right.
So we
Not
really,
Happy Turkey Day, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas. So, to maintain that part of our heritage. And, thank you so much again for coming on. We'll see you again sometime real soon. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And as always, everyone out there who watches this, Sic Semper Tyrannis.